The night had finally quieted down in our small home tucked away in the leafy suburbs of Asheville, North Carolina. The week had been brutal. Back-to-back shifts at the clinic, groceries, car trouble. I barely had enough energy left to brush my teeth. Slipping into my worn flannel pajamas, I let out a long breath and collapsed onto the bed, muscles aching with exhaustion. Outside, crickets sang in the soft autumn air. Inside, the only sound was the hum of the old fridge down the hall. My son Lucas had passed out early after a long day of college classes and his usual marathon of video games. At 19, he was still learning how to balance life on his own terms. But to me, he was always that boy with scraped knees and a heart too big for this world. The moonlight filtered through the blinds, casting silvery stripes across my quilt. I tugged the blanket up to my chin, comforted by the stillness of the house. After the divorce from Rob 8 years ago, the quiet had been hard to get used to. He didn't leave in anger, just drifted away, like mist in the morning. Lucas had stayed with me, and we'd made our own kind of life. Just the two of us. I had just started to drift off when I heard it, a soft knock, almost too quiet to notice. I frowned, unsure if it was real. Then it came again. "Mom?" Lucas's voice was low, muffled through the door. My heart stirred. He hadn't called out for me in the middle of the night since he was 12. I propped myself up, blinking against the darkness. "Lucas? You okay?" The door creaked open a few inches. He stood there in the hallway glow, shoulders slouched, eyes down. I couldn't sleep," he said, barely above a whisper. "Come on in," I murmured, patting the space beside me. He stepped in, quiet as a shadow, and eased into the bed, lying on his side facing the wall. I could feel the tension in him, the kind that didn't come from caffeine or too much screen time. It was deeper, an ache he didn't know how to name. "You want to talk?" I asked gently. He shook his head. "Just wanted to be close to you." His voice cracked a little. That simple confession sliced through the fog of sleep. My heart clenched with tenderness. And something else. Something I couldn't quite define. I reached over and brushed a strand of hair from his brow, a habit I'd never fully let go of. His eyes fluttered shut, and he exhaled softly, like it was the first breath he'd taken all day. For a long moment, we just lay there. The silence between us, heavy, full of unspoken things. A flicker of unease passed through me. Not fear, but awareness. The kind that lingers in the space where love shifts, where something familiar starts to feel different. Now, I told myself it was just a mother's concern. Just my heart breaking a little for the boy who carried too much. But as his hand brushed mine under the covers, our fingers barely touching, I didn't pull away. I couldn't. There was a warmth there. Tentative. Searching. It held me still. I closed my eyes, heart thudding louder than it should, and let the moment linger. Not just because he needed comfort, but because part of me did too. Sunlight streamed through the kitchen window the next morning, casting a warm glow across the counter. I stood at the stove, flipping pancakes, the scent of butter and maple syrup softening the strange knot in my stomach. The events of last night lingered. Lucas's voice in the dark, his hand brushing mine, the way his presence wrapped around me like an echo I couldn't shake. I tried to stay grounded in the rhythm of routine. Whisk, pour, flip, plate. But my mind kept circling back to the warmth of him next to me, his soft breath, the quiet comfort of our closeness. It should have just been a moment of motherly care. Just comfort, nothing more. So why did it feel so charged? The floor creaked, and I turned to find Lucas shuffling into the kitchen, hair still messy from sleep. He wore an old hoodie and sweats, the same look he'd had since high school, but something in his eyes felt different, deeper, like he'd crossed an invisible line overnight. "Morning," he mumbled, sliding into the chair at the table. "Morning, kiddo," I said, keeping my tone light. I set a plate of pancakes in front of him, the kind with the crispy edges just the way he liked. He dug in silently. The only sounds were the soft clink of his fork and the occasional birdsong outside. I sat across from him, pretending to scroll through my phone, trying not to watch him. But I felt it again. The current between us, quiet but steady, pulsing beneath the surface. He glanced up once, catching my eye for just a second. "Thanks," he said. Just that. But it carried more weight than it should have. "For what?" I asked, voice barely above the hum of the fridge. "Last night." He looked down, slicing through a pancake. "It helped." I swallowed hard, my chest tightening. "Anytime," I said, offering a soft smile. "You know that." Lucas nodded, but didn't look up. He finished eating in silence, then stood, his chair scraping lightly against the tile. As he rinsed his plate, I noticed how tall he'd grown, how his shoulders filled out the hoodie that used to hang loose. He wasn't a boy anymore. He hadn't been for a while. As the day wore on, we drifted into our separate routines. Me tackling laundry and emails, him locked away in his room with textbooks and headphones. But the house didn't feel the same. It was quieter, yes, but it also felt heavier. Like the air itself had thickened with something unspoken. Late in the afternoon, I was folding towels in the living room when Lucas reappeared. He leaned against the doorway, arms crossed, watching me. There was something hesitant in his posture, like he was testing the water before stepping in. "Do you ever think about Dad?" he asked suddenly. I paused mid-fold, caught off guard. "Sometimes," I admitted. "Not as much as I used to. We were different people, even back then." He nodded slowly. "I just wonder, if I'd done something different, maybe he wouldn't have left." My heart broke a little. I crossed the room and hugged him before he could retreat. "Sweetheart, none of that was on you. Your dad made his choices. You were just a kid." Lucas leaned into the hug, his head resting against my shoulder, and for a moment, I felt it again. That stillness, that pull. My hand slid up to the back of his neck, fingers lightly brushing his hair, and he didn't move away. His breath warmed the side of my neck, and just like the night before, that quiet ache returned. Familiar, unsettling, impossible to ignore. The sun dipped low behind the pine trees, casting long shadows across the backyard. The house had slipped into that quiet rhythm again. Dishes done, laundry folded, a movie humming softly in the background. Lucas and I were curled up on the living room couch, a bowl of popcorn balanced between us. The fire crackled in the stone hearth, throwing flickers of gold across his face. He leaned into the cushions, one arm stretched along the back of the couch, his body just barely brushing mine. It felt natural, familiar even. But that familiar warmth had started to feel different. He wasn't clinging to me like a child anymore. He was just there, close, calm, present in a way that made the room feel smaller, like the air had thickened with every breath. I focused on the screen, pretending to laugh at whatever sitcom we'd put on, but my mind wasn't on the show. I could feel his eyes on me. When I finally glanced over, he didn't look away. "You okay?" I asked. He gave a small nod, eyes steady. "Yeah, just thinking." "About what?" Lucas hesitated. Then, in a voice barely louder than the crackling fire, he said, "About us." My heart skipped, then thudded harder. "What do you mean?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached down and gently brushed his fingers against mine on the couch cushion. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't a slip. It was a choice. And I didn't pull away. "Sometimes," he began slowly, "I feel like we're more connected than we realize. Not just because you raised me, but because we really see each other." My throat tightened. I opened my mouth, then closed it again. He wasn't wrong. That's what made it so hard. Lucas and I had weathered so much together. Birthdays with empty chairs, late-night stomach bugs, missed field trips, broken down cars. We had become a team, a unit, something stronger than just parent and child. "I feel it too," I said quietly. He exhaled like he'd been holding that breath for a while. Then he smiled, a small, unsure thing. I thought maybe it was just me. We fell into silence again, the fire popping beside us, the sitcom long forgotten. Outside, wind brushed the windows with a soft rustle. Then he said it, softly, almost too softly to catch. Sometimes I feel like you're the only person who really knows me. Like, really knows me. And I don't ever want to lose that. I turned toward him, searching his face. In that moment, I didn't see a boy. I saw a young man who'd grown up in the shadow of loss, who'd built a world with me from the ashes of what we'd lost. And I saw myself, lonely, tired, carrying everything for too long. Our fingers intertwined again, this time without hesitation. His hand was warm, steady. I didn't know what this was becoming. I didn't have the words for it yet, but I didn't let go. It rained that night. Not the kind of storm that crashes down with fury, but the soft, steady kind that taps gently at the windows like a lullaby. The house felt even quieter than usual. Lucas had stayed in his room most of the evening after our quiet conversation on the couch, but his presence never really left the space between us. I could still feel the warmth of his fingers wrapped around mine, still hear the quiet weight of his voice saying, "I don't ever want to lose that." Around 10, I turned off the TV and headed upstairs. I paused at his door, hand hovering over the knob, wondering if he was still awake. But I didn't knock. I kept walking. 10 minutes later, as I curled up in bed, the sound came again, the same soft knock as the night before. "Mom?" His voice was gentle. I sat up slowly, heart already skipping. "Yeah?" The door opened and he stepped inside. He didn't speak right away, just looked at me with those hazel eyes that always gave him away. He was holding a blanket under one arm. "I couldn't sleep again," he said. "Mind if I nodded, lifting the covers without hesitation. He slid in beside me, the bed dipping with his weight, his warmth immediately close. We lay on our backs at first, not touching, listening to the rain. "It's different now," he whispered into the dark. I turned my head, meeting his gaze in the low glow of the hallway lights spilling through the open door. "What is?" I asked, even though I already knew. "This feeling, it's not just needing comfort, it's more. And I know I shouldn't say that, but I can't pretend it's not real." His honesty landed like thunder in my chest, quiet but impossible to ignore. My breath caught. "Lucas, I know it's complicated," he said quickly, "and I'm not trying to mess things up. But I feel closer to you than I ever have to anyone. And not just because you're my mom. You're more than that to me. You always have been." He reached for my hand again, our fingers finding each other easily in the dark. The weight of his touch didn't feel wrong. It felt grounding, like something that had been waiting a long time to be seen. I turned onto my side, facing him. He mirrored me, eyes soft, open, vulnerable. "I don't know what this means," I said, barely above a whisper, "but I do know you've always been the one thing I've never doubted. The one person who's always been there." He didn't say anything. He just leaned forward, slow, unsure, waiting. His forehead touched mine, and we stayed like that, still, breathing the same air, hearts racing quietly in sync. Outside, the rain kept falling. Inside, something had shifted. Morning came slowly. A soft gray light crept through the blinds, bathing the room in a quiet calm. I opened my eyes to find Lucas already awake beside me, lying still, his gaze fixed on the ceiling. For a moment, we didn't speak. The world outside was silent, as if it, too, was waiting to see what we would do next. "Did you sleep?" I asked softly. He nodded, just once. "Better than I have in a long time?" I turned onto my side, studying his face. There was something peaceful in it now, something settled. He didn't look away when our eyes met. He just looked at me, like he had something to say, but didn't want to scare the moment away. "I keep trying to convince myself this is just some emotional thing," he said after a pause. "But it's not. It's real. At least to me." I swallowed, heart thudding again. "I know." His hand found mine under the covers, gentle, unhurried, our fingers laced like it was the most natural thing in the world. And maybe, in that moment, it was. We lay there like that for a while. The silence wasn't awkward. It was full of meaning, of tension, of something we both felt but still didn't fully understand. When he finally sat up, he didn't rush out. He looked back down at me, his voice low and clear. "I'm gonna make some coffee. Want some?" I nodded. "Yeah, thanks." He left the room quietly, and I sat up slowly, the air suddenly cooler without him beside me. My mind raced, replaying every moment from the night before. The way his forehead had rested against mine, the way his voice trembled with truth. This wasn't just a phase, it wasn't confusion, and I wasn't just a mother trying to fix something broken. Something had shifted. Something real. Downstairs, the clink of mugs and the drip of the coffee machine brought me back to routine. I wrapped myself in a sweater and made my way into the kitchen, where the scent of dark roast mingled with the quiet hum of the early morning. Lucas handed me a mug. Our fingers touched again, just briefly, but it was enough to send that familiar current through me. We stood across from each other, sipping quietly. The world outside the window was wet with dew, but the storm had passed. "Mom," he said slowly, setting his mug down. "I know this isn't simple. I don't expect you to have answers. I don't even have them myself. But I need you to know something." I looked up, heart in my throat. "You're the person I trust most in this world. And what I feel, it's not just comfort or nostalgia. It's more. I care about you. Deeply. And I'm not afraid of that anymore." I set my coffee down beside his. He stepped closer. I didn't move away. The space between us vanished with a breath. And then, his hand resting lightly on my waist, he leaned in, eyes asking permission without words. I didn't stop him. Our lips met, not in a rush, not out of impulse, but with a stillness so complete it felt like the room itself had exhaled. When we finally parted, he looked at me, searching for fear or regret, but there was none. Just quiet understanding, and something new. The rest of the day passed like a dream. Not loud, not rushed, just slow, quiet, and strangely peaceful, like something heavy had finally been set down. Lucas and I moved through the house almost as if in sync. We cooked breakfast together, side by side, his elbow brushing mine as he handed me a spatula. We talked about simple things, classes, weekend plans, the heater making that strange noise again. But beneath every word was the echo of what had passed between us that morning. That kiss. It had changed something. Not just in the way we looked at each other, but in how we existed in the same space. There was no pretending now. No more hiding behind soft excuses or vague glances. We knew. That evening, the sky dimmed to a soft watercolor of orange and lavender. We found ourselves on the back porch again, just like we had days ago, the wooden swing creaking gently beneath our weight. A blanket was draped over our legs, the autumn air cool against our skin. Lucas leaned his head back, watching the stars blink into view. I watched him for a moment, his profile calm, thoughtful, and realized just how much had changed in so little time. "I don't know what comes next," he said, breaking the silence. "Me neither," I replied. He turned to look at me, "But I'm not afraid of it, not if it's with you." There was no hesitation in his voice, just truth. That same quiet strength he'd had as a kid, now grown, matured, deepened. I smiled, eyes stinging slightly. "We've always figured it out, haven't we?" He nodded. "Yeah, just never like this." He reached over and took my hand again, weaving our fingers together. The gesture was gentle, but full of meaning. It wasn't a question anymore. It was a promise. Inside, the house glowed warmly through the windows. It looked like every other home on the block. No one would guess that inside, something rare was unfolding. Something tender, quiet, and complicated. As the night deepened, we stayed on that porch swing, wrapped in the kind of silence that said everything words couldn't. The stars watched overhead. The wind whispered through the trees. And in that small pocket of the world, we existed. Not as mother and son, not as something taboo or reckless, but as two people who had found comfort, connection, and something that defied easy names. Maybe the world wouldn't understand. Maybe questions would come, but for now, there was only this: United States, together, in the stillness, in the unknown. And somehow, that was enough.